arbitration, trademark laws, land acquisition cases, tenancy and rent cases, service laws, family law, property matters, international agreements, municipal law cases, criminal and civil cases, public interest litigation, rendering free legal aid and advice to poor and needy women and children. She was the part of some landmark cases before the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Civil Appeal number 9367, 9369, 2011, the Secretary of Minister of Defense versus Babita Punia and others, regarding grant of permanent commission and grant command roles to women officers of Indian Army, WP Civil number 494, 2012,
think we can
Justice
start.
K.S.
Thank you, Anmol.
Sami and
Thank you.
another versus Union of India. Privacy was declared as fundamental right and also part of matter challenging nikah halala and polygamy, which is pending adjudication before the Honorable. We heartily welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
It was
ma'am.
a very, very long introduction. Anyways, let's start today's topic. And see, the topic is permanent commission to women in Indian Army. And before we start, it comes to my mind, why are we even discussing? So something which should have been given ordinarily was not given. Therefore, it was the courts which had to finally intervene, and permanent commission had to be given to women in Indian Army when it was already given to their male counterparts. Before I dwell further in the subject, let's study or deal with the most sacrosanct articles of our constitution, which is the most important part, and of course sacrosanct for all the lawyers, and that is part 3 of our Indian constitution. So the fundamental rights I'm talking about. Article 14 says that the state shall not deny to any person equality before the law or equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. Going further, Article 15 says that there should be no prohibition or discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, sex, caste, or place of birth. However, I pause here for a because Article 15(3) further says that nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. Now, this article gives special power to the state to have special provisions for women and children because it was seen that these are special groups which require special, owing to the fact that though the women are 50% of the population, but are still not up to their their male counterparts. Now, let me read further. And if we go to Article 16, what it says, equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. Now, here is an article which says that there shall be equality of opportunity to every individual. Now, this is a gender neutral article. It means that the equality of opportunity should be provided equally to men as well as women. Now we go further, and I would now dwell upon certain points of this judgment. I was very fortunate to have been a part in this a big battle that has been actually won in courts by these women officers. I was the advocate on record in this matter, and this matter was mainly argued by Ms. Meenakshi Lekhi and senior advocate Ms. Aishwarya Bhati. Even in the courtrooms, when this matter was going on, there was so much of exhilaration all around. We could see that there would be so many advocates who would just come and watch the arguments because of women standing in their crisp uniforms, standing from 10:30 till 4 in the courtrooms, just waiting to have a positive outcome in their matter. Now, today we are going to study this judgment, which is called the Ministry of Defense versus Babita Punia. Now, this matter actually was filed in the Delhi High Court in the year 2005 by a lawyer. She was Babita Punia, and she had filed actually a public interest litigation. But later on, as the matter progressed, Indian Army officers, naval officers, and Air Force officers joined the cause. It was initially a public interest litigation, but as matter progressed, it was seen that it was not a PIL anymore. There were grievances because of the fact that these lady officers were performing exemplary in their fields, but they had somewhere in their heart that we have been denying this permanent commission, which is already given to our male counterparts. So let me give you a brief background that in the army, there are mainly three types of roles. So one is a combat role. Then you have a combat support arms. And then you have the services. So in the services, you have the medical corps. In medical corps, there were women from the beginning. But combat arms, of course, till today, in combat arms, women are not taken by the Indian Army. And even through this judgment, this has been left as a policy decision to the government. Because even in Delhi High Court, the women were not actually fighting for a combat role. They were only saying that we should be given permanent commission, and why we will deal it further. So now, since from independence, women were nowhere in the army. Later on, in the year 1991, there was a policy decision taken. Now, why the policy decision was taken was that the Act of 2050, the Army Act of 1950, sorry, the Army Act of 1950, Section 12 says that ineligibility of females for enrollment or employment. No female shall be eligible for enrollment or employment in the regular army except corps, department, branch, or other body forming part of or army. Central government may by notification in the official gazette specify in this behalf. So therefore, it was important that a notification had to be brought about to get the women inducted in Indian Army. Now that was done by a notification which came out as a policy decision in the year 1991. Now initially, the women were inducted as a short service commission and only for a period of 5 years. 5 years was the outer limit then. Then thereafter, it was like an experiment because before that, 1991-92, never ever women were there taken in the Indian Army. So it was kind of an experiment which was tried, and therefore they were not taken in combat roles, but only initially they were taken in two of the arms. So there are several arms, like you have the infantry, artillery, the judge advocate general, the army education corps. So there are various corps or various areas in the army. And initially it was only given in the judge advocate general and army education corps. So for these two, it was given for 5 years. And combat support arms are the areas where there are not actually scuffle, but you are actually supporting in the combat. So thereafter, as soon as the 5 years period was coming to an end, it was further extended by a notification for 5 years, and thereafter another extension for a period of 4 years. Now, this was called SSC, Short Service Commission. The outer limit was placed as 14 years. Now, after 14 years, these women had to go out. And imagine, it was not even a pensionable service then. So you have given your youth, your major primary years of your life to the service of nation. And in the end of 14 years, you're actually out with no pension. There were other benefits also, which actually were given to even a Jawan of an army, but were not given to these women officers who have given their 14 years. Now, if I will just, in few words, I will just tell you that what exactly are the differences that these women were not, the differences between the other permanent commission male officers, even the Jawan and JCOs, and the SSC women officers. Now, pension for a permanent commission male officer, it was pensionable after 20 years. They were given all kinds of emoluments like ex-serviceman status, ex-serviceman contributory health scheme, re-employment, encashment of leave, etc., etc. Now, even for a Jawan, a JCO, the pensionable service was after 15 years. Ex-serviceman status was given, ex-serviceman contributory health scheme was given, re-employment, yes, and of course paid for 300 days of encashed leave. Now coming to the SSC women officers, after 14 years, no pension, no ex-serviceman status. So once you wore a crisp uniform and suddenly you have nothing, not even an ESM status, and no ex-serviceman contributory health facility. There was no option for a re-employment, and they were only paid 90 days of encashed leaves. Now, why are we not talking about the short service male officers here? Because male officers, these gentlemen officers, they are altogether a different category, because they were allowed to opt for permanent commission after 5 years of service. So there was an option given to them to opt for a permanent commission after they complete 5 years of service. A second option when they completed 10 years of service. And once they got the permanent commission, they were authorized for all these benefits of permanent commission officers. Now you see how bigger was a parity between an SSC male officer and an SSC female officer, a women officer. So the situation was more or like the same in, not exactly same in Army and Navy. And of course, in Navy, we have already got a judgment by the Honorable Court, similar in the lines of the Army judgment. And in Air Force, we are waiting for the final arguments to conclude, because some of the arguments were done before the lockdown happened. And after that, we are just waiting that the final arguments are concluded and we can have a judgment in the Air Force matter also. Now, the Navy judgment is called Union of India versus Annie Nagaraj and others. We will discuss the Army matter, and more or less, apart from few conditions here and there, it is more or less the same. Now, what happened was that this permanent commission, what is actually means is, I have told you about what a short service commission is. A short service male officer is different from a short service women officer. The kind of options that you get to opt for PC. Now, what it is to be opting for a permanent commission. Now, permanent commission means you have to give your 20 years in service and then till superannuation. Now, what does superannuation means in Army is different for different ranks. So, right from the age of 54 and above, you have, for different ranks, you have different retirement ages. So, till superannuation, which is of a particular rank, it is pensionable, and the other perks that I was just talking about, that all these things are given to a permanent commission officer. Now, it is very interesting to tell you that the final judgment came in on 12th of March 2010. It was delivered by Delhi High Court by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, as the Lordship's then was. Uh, he gave such uh, clear interpretations that why you cannot you cannot say no to for the grant of permanent commission to these women officers who are working exemplary good in their services, who are no less. They have, all the criterias that are there for an officer. They meet all those criteria, be it physical standards, medical standards, showing enough courage, everything. When they are meeting, and when they are good for 14 years, why aren't they good for 20 years or even more? So the judgment was given in 2010, and the main points that were given, the point of combat or non-combat was not touched, because it was left to the policy decision of the government whether. And in fact, it was never the fight also, that women were saying we want to be in the combat roles. That was never the fight. The fight was permanent commission, and therefore the question of whether combat or non-combat was left for the will of the army, will of the MOD, the Ministry of Defense. But on the other issues, the court gave a positive judgment. The women officers were really happy. But then, and 2 months' time was given Delhi High Court to comply with the directions given in the order, in the judgment. Now, as soon as that was done, the MOD challenged that before the Supreme Court. Now, something interesting happened, that after 2 months, there were contempt petitions also filed before the Supreme Court, saying that 2 months' time was given by the Delhi High Court, but the order has not been complied till yet. So it is a contempt. So what happened was that these applications were taken up by the court, and they were, although they were not stayed, the conditions, the directions given by the High Court, they were not stayed, but because there were positive statements made by the Solicitor General, that we are in the process of completing the formalities and it would soon be done. So based on that, they said that no coercive action should be taken, and in the meantime, please proceed further and do the needful. So they did not stay the judgment, and that, I'm telling you, happened in the year 2011. It was a long drawn battle, because nearly after more than 9 years, almost 10 years of passing of the judgment of Delhi High Court, the judgment of the Supreme Court came in, the 17th February to 2020 judgment, which is celebrated all over country. It came. And in the meantime, in the interregnum, what had happened was that there was a notification which came on 25th of February 2019. Now, which notification said that, okay, we are giving the Short Service Commission women officers the option of permanent commission, but it will be given prospectively. Now, imagine the plight of these women officers, some of them almost 25 years into the service, and it was given prospectively. So then finally, I think this was the last thing that could have happened, because everybody became, very, that they just wanted the judgment anyhow, and a lot of efforts were made by these women officers, by the advocates, so that the matter, and there is so much of pendency that somehow it will someday it would come, could not be argued because of some other thing, or etc., etc. So finally, the decision was given, the arguments concluded, and after this, there's one more very important thing which I would like to highlight here in this 25th February circular notification, that they said that we would be given permanent commission to these women army officers, but we would be giving them only staff appointments and not criteria appointments. Now, let me pause here for a moment and I'll just explain you what exactly is a staff appointment and a criteria appointment. Staff appointment is like the normal roles that you are given to perform. You are not given the leadership roles to perform. You are not given the command roles, or you would not command your unit. So all these important posts, which obviously, if you are given, you would be given promotion and consequential benefits accordingly, because in army it is everything is how you perform. So all these things were denied, and the criteria commanding roles that an officer gets, these are significant and very, very important roles. So in this notification, the only the staff appointments, the women were considered only for staff appointments and not for the criteria appointments. This kind of discrimination was like, was like keeping the women officers as a second grade citizens in the Indian army. And it was strongly felt after this notification came that being a woman cannot be an embargo. It was, you, if you are a particular gender, this should never come in your way. If you are otherwise performing your duties well, there is no other problem there. You are medically fit, physically meeting all criterias. Then why should there be this discrimination altogether? And even the fact that the option to opt for permanent commission was given to the SSC women officer after the end of 3 years and before the end of 4 years. So that means the lady officer had to opt as soon as she completes 3 years and before she completes 4 years, and that too once. Whereas the gentlemen officers at 3 stages. So at the when you are new, when you're young, you've just joined the services, 3 years, maybe you don't know the realities. You're not that strong, or you haven't known the things so well that you can decide for your entire future. So this was another discrimination that had happened. Now, the arguments further advanced on this notification as well. And there was a note which was handed over by both sides. As you all know, that in these kind of bigger matters, usually as soon as the arguments are over, both sides give their respective written submissions. And the written submissions were given by the Union of India also, officers also. Now, this note, I would just try and read few points from it, which actually paved a way for a stronger judgment in our favor, because it clearly had spelt out things which were which didn't go well, even before, with the court as well as anyone present there or with the advocates there. So they gave certain points, such as they say that discrimination, they say that the union government has submitted that the army faces a huge management challenge to manage the women officers in soft postings with required infrastructure, not involving hazardous duties with regular posts with the other women in the station. Then the army has to cater for spouse postings, long absence on account of maternity leave, child care leave, and as a result of which the legitimate dues of male officers have to be compromised. Now, this legitimate dues that they're talking about, where the entire strength of male officers in the army is 96%, and only 4% of women officers are there in the Indian army. So there was a scare that if the women are allowed for a PC, then the legitimate dues of male officers have to be compromised, which are already 96%. So this was something which really was difficult to digest in those written submissions. And then it was also said that physically the women are weak, and therefore they cannot really participate in the same kind of situations as a male officer is participating. And they were saying that there are the capacity is different, physical standards are different. And there was one important thing which said was the physiological limitation on the employability of women officers. And because of the fact that there are challenges of confinement, motherhood, and childcare. And they were saying that there was also a danger of the woman officer being captured by the enemy and becoming a prisoner of war. So there were a dichotomy in the situation, dichotomy in the arguments submitted, because at one time you were saying that we are not even considering them in the combat roles, but at the same time you're saying that there are dangers of the women officers being captured by the enemy and becoming prisoners of war. So um, of course, the court dealt with all the arguments, and in the brief written submission that were given, there was a background which was given. Of course, the worldwide scenario was discussed, and let me tell you here that out of the entire countries in the world, there are more than dozen countries which already have women in their armies and even in combat roles. Just to give you a few examples here, so you have France, which has 1/5 of the entire strength as women officers. You have Canada with 15% of the total military force. You have Australia at 10%. In Denmark, since 1988, women are inducted in the army. In Germany, 2001. So the women officers were there in Germany, but from 2001, they opened the doors even for combat roles. And there are other countries like Israel, Russia, USA, UK. So all these countries already have women officers as permanent commission officers. Then there were various examples of exemplary courage which have been showed by the women officers while they were on duty, were also given by our side. And if I would just read here very few examples that were given. So there was an example given uh, of Major Mitali Madhumita, as she then was. She was the first woman who got a gallantry award. And these gallantry awards, let me tell you, are given in situation when they have shown exemplary courage. And uh, though she was from the Army Education Corps, but she was right there in Kabul. And in the Indian embassy, there was an attack. There was a suicide bomber attack. And when she received the news about this attack, she actually ran for 2 kilometers. She reached on the spot and she saved many, many lives. Almost more, I think around 19 lives were lost in that attack, but she was able to save so many other lives. So, this is one nowhere can say that because she was a woman, she could not act in that kind of a difficult situation. Then you have a sword of honor, which is given to the when the passing out parade happens, and out of the entire group, that is training, the sword of honor is given to the cadet who has been excellent and who has topped the chart. So nowadays you have even the cadets, the women officers, who are given these these passing out parade sword of honor. So this was one example which was given. Then, if we all know, we all have read about the Balakot 2019 strike. We all know squadron leader Abhinandan Varthaman. But you will be surprised to know that the flight that was controlled by Minty Agarwal, and she was the squadron leader who was controlling the flight, the flight directions of Wing Commander Varthaman. And for that, she was given a Yuddha Sena medal. So when we are all talking about, of course, Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, we have to acknowledge there was one woman who was actually not dealing from the front, but you know how these warfares now are. You don't need to be exactly on the front all the time, but you manage so many things from behind. And it is because of your efficiency, your proficiency, that whosoever is dealing on the front actually performs excellent. So she was given a Yuddha Sena medal because of showing that exemplary courage in those difficult circumstances. Then there were various other examples given by the by the by the side, and they were saying that uh, all these women officers, they when they are, they are actually no less when they are giving their duties. And if you are talking about, there was also one point in the written arguments given, that the Jawans come from a rustic background, and it is very difficult for these Jawans to take orders from a women officer. So it was said that they cannot take orders, or they have to be, will act in a particular manner when they will see a woman commanding over them. But during the course of arguments, we were just chit-chatting with these women officers, and they would show us the messages that these, after, as soon as the judgment was pronounced, the messages from uh, their Jawans, congratulating them and addressing them as Sabji, which is absolutely gender neutral. And they were saying that, soon we are hoping that you will become a CO. CO means that soon you will be commanding the units. So these were so many important tidbits when we are in the court. We talk to these our clients, and they divulge such beautiful information, and it was a very dear case to me as well, because I got to know so many intricacies during those arguments, the way it happened. Now, when this judgment was written, I will just highlight a few important points, that why ultimately we got the judgment in our favor. What were the points which were considered by the Honorable Court? Now, the Honorable Courts read out Article 33 of the Constitution, which empowers the Parliament to determine by law the extent to which the rights conferred by Part 3 of the Constitution shall be restricted or abrogated in their application with reference to the members of the armed forces, so as to ensure the proper discharge of their duties and the maintenance of discipline amongst them. So this Article 33 is with reference to special condition, or special, you can say, a power given with respect to the armed forces, because some of the rights are taken away, are restricted when you're talking about the army. But there is a rider there. Such a restriction or abrogation must be by law. it cannot be out just like that applied. You have to have a plausible explanation for that restriction or abrogation. So, and that was, of course, there has to be because of a discipline or anything, but you have to satisfy that. Now, for this kind of a restriction, not granting PC to women officers, I have just told you what were the points, what were the the reasons given by the Union of India. Now, when the honorable judge deals with those, there are few excerpts that I would read, and beautifully they have tried to explain the typical stereotype that we have when it comes to gender justice, and they they take the points one by one, and the points raised by the advocate for the army was that this is a profession which requires sacrifice and commitment beyond the call of duty. Then women officers have to deal with pregnancy, motherhood, domestic obligations towards their children and families, and they may not be so well suited to the life of a soldier in the armed force. Then a soldier must have the physical capability to engage in combat, and inherent in the physiological differences between men and women is the lowering standards applicable to women. Then, and of course, I told you about the all male in a unit would require a moderated behavior in the presence of women officers, the physiological limitations. Then the deployment of women officers is not advisable in areas where members of the armed forces are confronted with minimal facility for habitat and hygiene. Now, let me tell you that we had actually placed the facts that the women officers are actually deputed, and they are even in charge of taking the convoy of 50, 60 armed men to the places like Leh and Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir. So when you're already doing it, but the problem is that you are not accepting the fact. Now, the court said that the way the arguments are brought forward are if are like the responsibility of raising a family, children is completely on women, and the men can be just kept out of it, and this is the written note also somewhere relied that the minimal facilities for habitat and hygiene are the main factors. And whereas we had presented by data that 30% of the total women officers are in fact deputed in conflict areas. So what the note said and what was the reality, there were two different things. Now, the main point that was highlighted by the judge is that there has to be a change in mindset to bring true equality in the army. And of course, the famous belief about the gender roles that men are socially dominant, physically powerful, and the breadwinners of the family, whereas women are weak and physically submissive and primarily caretakers confined to a domestic atmosphere. And this is the mindset which needs to be changed. Now, we were nowhere arguing that, take the women in the combat roles. We want to go right up in the line of fire. We want, be there just in the front. The issue was when you are granting permanent commission to the male officers, you're giving them an option. Why not to us? So I told you about the few examples about Major Madhumita and Minty Agrawal, squadron leader Minty Agrawal. Then recently, Captain Tanya Shergill, she became the first Indian woman parade adjutant to lead an all-men contingent in New Delhi this 15th January 2020. Now, when a women officer can lead an all-men contingent, then it is little difficult to digest that the Jawans would not take orders from them. I told you about the Leh and Ladakh convoys are deputed to these areas, and Major Gopika Bhatti, she was also one of the respondents who was given the role of a convoy commander, and she handled junior commissioned officers, Jawans, drivers, supporting staff, vehicles filled with logistic, arms, and ammunitions, and other military equipment. So she was there. She handled everything in the major areas where scuffle keep on happening, though it is not a clearly declared war, but scuffles are happening there every now and then. So the court was conscious of the fact. The court dealt with all these points that were raised by the Union of India, and it said that the time has come for a realization that women officers in the army are not adjuncts to a male-dominated establishment whose presence must be tolerated within narrow confines. Imagine such a strong worded judgment. And when you read para 57 and 58, I'm sure you all would make note of this judgment. So just read these paragraphs. This is actually part F that Honorable Justice Chandrachud is actually dealing with all those points given, the written submissions given by the Union of India. And just read, you can imagine the state of mind when the honorable judge is writing these, such a gender neutral statements. There is absolutely no discrimination here, and he's referring to all these in such clear words, saying that then it was further carried on, and of course the court was not happy with the fact that the Delhi High Court judgment came in 2010, and till 2020 the judgment was not complied in true letter and spirit. And in fact, the 2019 circular, 25th February 2019 circular, was in fact not taking care of the 2010 judgment. So finally, the court, what directions they gave, they removed the blanket restriction, which was appointments. Remember, we did talk about the two kind of appointments that are given in the Indian Army. One is the staff appointments and the criteria appointments. So the notification talked about the fact that you would be taken only in staff appointments and not criteria appointments. So the Honorable Court said that these words will not be enforceable. Staff appointments was deleted, and women would be considered in both kind of appointments. And of course, combat and non-combat was again left here because that was nowhere even a point of conflict. So then in para H, there were certain directions which were given by the Honorable Court, and they said that all serving women officers, because remember, this was a journey which started in 2005 and 2020. Now, that was the time when some of them were serving, and they were about to complete their 14 years, and they didn't know how will things unfold. So it had been a long drawn battle altogether. So therefore, there were some provisions which were given as a one-time measure as well. So the court said that all serving women officers on short service commission will be considered for the grant of permanent commissions, irrespective of any of them crossed 14 years or maybe 20 years of service. Then on all women presently in service as SSC officers. Then the women with more than 14 years of service who do not opt for being considered for the grant of PCs will be entitled, because you remember that I told you that the option was only given at the end of 3 years and before 4 years. So who did not opt by then, they will also be considered for the grant of PC, or and they will be entitled to continue in service until they attain 20 years of pensionable service. Then, as a one-time measure, the benefit of continuing in service until the attainment of pensionable service shall also apply to all the existing SSC officers with more than 40 years of service who are not appointed on permanent commission. Of course, the staff appointments which was used in that notification was it was directed that it will not be enforced. Then the women officers, because some of them, imagine, they even crossed the age of 20 years. So they said that the SSC women officers with over 20 years of service who are not granted PC shall retire on pension in terms of the policy decision. Then at the stage of opting for the grant of PC, all the choices for specialization shall be available to women officers on the same terms as the male SSC officers. So there would be no discrimination if you're a male SSC officer or you are a female SSC officer, a women SSC officer. So again, the time limit that was given to comply with this order, which came on 17th February 2020, was 3 months. And from February, March, April, May, nothing happened. And I would just tell you that recently there was an application which was filed by the union saying that they are in the process of getting the commission things as according to the judgment, and soon, and they are given just 4 weeks more time to finally comply with all these provisions. And I hope that within this 4 weeks they come out with something substantive, and the directions are taken care in letter and spirit. However, we were told, although it was not on record, but we were told by these women officers that there are certain junior command courses that are expected now from these women officers to undergo. Now, let me tell you, junior command are the courses which actually happen when you're in the 5th or 6th year of service. Now, these women who have already completed 14 years, 15 years, 20 years, they are asked to undergo these junior courses, then I must say that we'll have to get it quote again, because this is again discriminatory in nature. Now, given these options, also you would know very well that in army there is a very, very strict discipline with and junior army personnel. So now when you are expected to do these junior command courses, you would be doing under much junior officers to you. So that is again discriminatory. And even I have learned that physical standards have been changed. In fact, they have been made stricter than before. So all these things we'll yet have to see how they unfold. But we are hopeful, because the Honorable Court understands the fact, also understands the plight of these women. So I'm sure that very soon we would be receiving the good news that the judgment has been complied. Now, just in short, I would tell you what happened in the Navy matters, because in Navy matters also a judgment has been pronounced, and this was done on 17th of March 2020. Union of India versus Annie Nagaraj. Now, Navy came with a very peculiar plea that in Navy, there is no permanent commission given to either a male officer or a female officer. So there is no discrimination, and there is nothing that that is discriminatory with respect to Navy. Now, when we went deep into the matter, we got to know that this was just a surface argument, but the option whether they would take up PC or SSC is given right in the beginning to the male officers, which was not given to the women officers, but was given only to the male officers. So, of course, the Honorable Court has dealt with all those and given a very positive judgment, just on the lines of the Army judgment. Air Force, the officers who will actually be affected and who are waiting and for the judgment are somewhere around 35 to 40. Let's see, we are hoping for a very positive judgment, and I am very, very happy that I think the time is also running. I've gone past my time, but I'm very happy that I've been given this opportunity to express my feelings about the judgment, to interact with you people in this kind of a situation uh, when we can't go out much, and this kind of an positive intellectual discourse is actually extremely thankful for Think India, Ganeshji, having been given a nice opportunity to interact with all of you. Yes. Of course, the students can ask certain questions. Maybe I have already crossed the time limit, but nevertheless, yes, please. Try and answer.
Students are requested to keep the questions short. Any questions? You can unmute your mic, start your video, and you can ask a question.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Kritika, and I was curious about the position of combat of women in army. It was not a point of contention. However, it is not to be conflicted that it is still violative of Article 14. There is still not equality on that front. So even if it was not taken up, why didn't the court take so much cognizance of this issue and give directions for it?
See, I read section 12 of the Army Act 1950 that says that the terms of employment, etc., are subject to a policy decision by the government. And when this matter was initially filed by Babita Punia before the Delhi High Court, you never know what lies ahead. So initially, you start with the small battles. Whether to be in a combat or non-combat was a different story altogether. These women initially, they were only considering the fact that after even giving 15 years, they were not giving permanent commission. So they were not actually they were thinking of combat or non-combat. They only their legitimate dues. Now, as far as combat roles are considered, looking to the peculiar, of course, I completely, if you ask my opinion, I completely feel that women today are able to do any kind of job that their male counterparts are doing. And I'm sure the time, as and when the time is right, things would happen. The kind of society we live in, nothing changes overnight. Fact, if I must tell you here that even the profession that I am in is actually a male bastion. And few months back, we were celebrating that there are now 3 women judges in the Supreme Court. Imagine the entire strength of the court, and we have just 3 women judges for the first time, and it was a point of exhilaration all around. So we are still struggling with it in every part, but we have to move forward with a positive attitude, and of course bit by bit. And of course, when you show, we are nowhere saying that you have to give any sort of concession to us, but given a chance, we can show that we are nowhere less. And I'm sure a day is not far when women, actually in Indian Air Force, I must tell you that the fighter pilots are women today. But in Indian Army, of course, they are not there in the combat arms. But the day is not far, I'm 100% sure. Any
No
other
questions, anyone?
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Vikrant.
Yeah, my question is that in paramilitary forces, the women are inducted at the soldiers level, the Jawans level. But in Indian Army or armed forces, still at the Jawans category, women are not there. They're only at the women or at the officers category. So any movement happening in this regard also, I wanted to know.
You start the movement? I have no idea about any such movement happening at the moment, but yes, very well, rightly pointed out. And also, I would like to flag here one issue, that it is not important that it's always who has to stand up for women causes. I believe that if the male counterparts stand up for us, then of course it has to be a cohesive battle. We have to fight against the stereotypes, the gender biases that are happening, and more and more men should come forward for the issues that women are facing. Then I can say that it can become a holistic battle.
Ma'am, I mean, anything in the aspect of policy happening.
Your voice is breaking. I can't
Your
hear
voice
you.
is your voice is breaking.
Ma'am, any policy decision to come uh, in the due course of time regarding this? That I wanted to know. Any kind of
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Well, in my knowledge, there is no such policy decision as of now. We don't know about it. But there is a positive anecdote which I would like to share with you here. That, when before the First World War, there were no women in the battlefield. They were never taken in any of the armies. So there were only fields where women were inducted. There were nurses, and they were used as honey traps. Then Second World War happened, and during that time, women were inducted because there was a shortage of male officers, male sepoys. So around that time, Second World War, women were inducted just to fill up the gaps because there were less number of males during that time. So maybe sometime when the time is right and the decision is taken that in fact now is the time that we can even induct women at the sepoy level, I'm sure this will be a positive step and also in the right direction. Why not? When the women can lead a contingent, when women can be there as an officer, they can, of course, be there as a Jawan as well. But as of now, I don't think so there is any such policy decision. Any other questions? Vedanshi, I think there are no more questions.
Yes, we can conclude now if there is no question now.
Yeah, anything that you want to add on?
No, ma'am, I'm not competent enough to add on this.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining us.
No, no, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.